Okay, folks, and welcome to this ski touring Facebook Live special with our panel of experts brought together by Mountaineering Scotland. And let's face it, it's probably the nearest we're all going to get to a night out at the moment. So, hey, let's make the most of it. Hopefully you've got a drink in your hand and you've got some interesting questions for our panel here. So introducing folk around the table this evening is Graham Moss. Graham, if we just have a little wave there, that's Graham. He is the lead forecaster for the Scottish Avalanche Information Service over at Loch Arbour. So he is here ready and waiting for your questions regarding Avalanche, which is very poignant at the moment. And then we have Di Gilbert, smiling away there with a rosy face. Di's just in from another amazing ski tour, and Di is probably the most avid ski tourer that I know, but also she's the director of Schema Scotland, which is the ski racing circuit, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for Di about that and how we could potentially be involved in the future. And last but not least, we have Andy Townsend. So Andy is the head of snow sports at our National Outdoor Centre at Glenmore Lodge, and he is also very keen to answer any questions about ski touring or ski techie kit. I think is probably Andy's forte, or if it isn't, it will be this evening. So yeah, get your questions in, folks. And just before we kick off, I'd just like to say what an amazing season that we're having at the moment, and hopefully many of you who are listening in this evening will be placed somewhere where you can get out in your local hills and skis. And looking at social media, there's been lots of adventures in the deep south hills of places like the Pentlands. So it's not just those folk lucky enough to live in the Highlands who are able to enjoy ski touring this winter. It's pretty awesome. So just kicking off, I think, Andy, I've got a techie question coming in first of all, so it's right up your street, and it is, how do I stop my skins balling up?
Right, so firstly, you've got to appreciate skins have a lifespan. Like tyres on your car, they won't last forever. And if you stick them in your cupboard for 6 months of the year, they dry up, they just don't last. And your whole enjoyment will be based on the fact that your skins are in good nick. If they're not in good nick, you're going to have a horrible time. If they're in good nick, then you go up and down, and you hoover up all the powder before anybody else. So definitely look after them. They fall into two categories, glue and hybrid. Hybrid is the new thing. It's a mixture of glue and other technology I don't understand. And they're basically washable, which means you just stick them in the sink with a bit of washing up liquid, give them a bit of a spa treatment, hang them up and dry them, and that rejuvenates the coating that the manufacturers put on the outside to stop them getting wet. If you've got slightly older skins and that doesn't work, a little bit of universal wax just rubbed vigorously into the hairs of the skin will do really well. And if you go onto YouTube and Google hot wax skins, you might get a video you don't want to watch, but you might also get a video that shows you how you can use an iron and some wax to put some waterproofness and a bit of life back into your skins. And hopefully that will stop them from balling up as you go from cold snow to warm snow. The only other thing you should do is not skin through bogs, because as soon as they're wet and you go into the cold, dry snow out of the boggy areas, your skin will freeze and it'll be as much use as a banana skin. So be super careful around boggy, Scottish boggy areas.
Yeah, that's a classic, isn't it? If you get your skins wet crossing a wee burn or something, and then they ball up really badly. And I was interested to hear that you can wash some types of skins, Andy, because I skied through some reindeer poo in the last couple of days, and there's some brown skid marks down mine. So can you just mention again which type of skins you can wash?
You would have to check with the manufacturers about which ones you can wash, but certainly Pomaca and Contour and Coltex all have skins that you can wash. Just from a personal point of view, I would always choose a European brand because I'm going to be skiing in a European type snowpack, either here in Scotland or in the Alps. Other skin manufacturers, maybe from North America, they are more focused on skinning in powder. And what they aren't so good at is gripping on the hard-packed, icy conditions that we get here in Scotland and overseas and in Europe.
Lovely, nice one. Thank you, Andy. And Di, there's a question in here about the Schema racing. So I think it's something that quite a lot of people perhaps haven't even heard of. Could you just tell us what Schema Scotland is to sort of to anyone who's not sure?
Oh, excellent. So Schema has been in Scotland since, my goodness, 2012. So this would have been the 9th season that we should have been racing. And the best way to describe Schema is ski mountaineering, the competitive element. So it's pretty much going around a set course as fast as you can, and that course might be quite short, it might be quite long, it might only be an uphill, a vertical course, or it might have numerous transitions, which I mean is up and down. And basically it's on the clock, up, down transitions, and it's the fastest person that wins. And it's massive in the continent, it's massive in the States, and it's been in Scotland for quite a few years now. So the competitive element of ski touring.
Great. And if people are interested in looking into it, how do they find it on? What's the website?
So our website's schemoscotland.co.uk, but if you were just to Google Schema, an amazing world will open up to you. So there's loads of stuff on the internet. Have a look at it, and if you're inspired, just come along to one of our races, not this year because they're all obviously cancelled, but certainly next year we'd like to be kicking off once again. And so we hold 6 races every year in 4 of the ski resorts, and I would definitely recommend, if you're new to Schema and you want to see what it's all like, come to the one in December at the Mighty Left, because that's the only one that we actually do laps. So you'll never actually feel as if you're at the back of the pack, because the fast guys will be lapping you.
Great stuff, excellent. Graham, question about Avalanche. Someone who lives sort of Killingway, and their local hills are the Ben Lawes range, and obviously the current 6 forecasts don't cover the Ben Lawes area. So what would your advice be to someone who's wanting to look at avalanche conditions for an area that isn't currently covered?
Thanks, Heather. Good question. Yeah, obviously the Avalanche Service covers the 6 main-ish climbing areas. So Ben Lawes would be out with that, and actually not very close to any. So I think one of the key things to understand is if you just decide to engage in your thought process the day before the morning of your tour, then you've lost a lot of information and you probably won't be off to a very good start. So it's really just, I think, a few days out, trying to understand what the conditions are like locally, and it's quite easy to do that. There's lots of forums these days, and also the Met Office have got very good mountain specific forecasts for the summits. So I think if I was thinking of going to Ben Lawes, I would be maybe a few days out looking at the weather forecast and just trying to understand really what the snow is likely to be doing. So obviously, if we've got cold temperatures and wind, we can work out where the wind slab or the unstable snow is forming. You know, typically a westerly wind would put the unstable snow into easterly aspects. I'd be looking at the freezing levels, so I could work out where the snow is going to be wet, where it's going to be dry, things like that. You know, and if it's warm and then cold, I would expect to find maybe an icy crust on some aspects, especially the windward side. So the key is just to try and keep on top of your understanding of the snowpack and how it's changing with the weather. And that sounds really complicated, but it's not really. It just requires a little bit of forward planning, and and a bit of commitment. So that'd be my top tip for the night.
Good. And I guess for someone just starting out, have a look around the Scottish Avalanche Information Service website and click on the areas nearest to where you're thinking of going, and it will give you a bit of indication of what's happening and what the hazard is as well.
That's right, because although we are in, Lochaber, Cairngorms, Glencoe, there's generally speaking a sort of east-west split in the conditions. So just knowing what's happening throughout the rest of Scotland would be a very good sort of building block to work out what's happening in your area, wherever you're heading for.
Nice one, yeah. Question in from Gordon. He was lucky enough to be out skiing this morning on a pair of 30-year-old Telemark skis. Excellent, waxless skis. And he had a great trip out, but on the return, he was balling up really badly. He was the skiing in fresh snow was okay, but when he got into his own tracks again, he was balling up super badly. So waxless 30-year-old Telemark skis, Andy. Any top tips on how to prevent that balling up?
Just be glad you're not on a set of wax skis, because that would have been even worse. I'm afraid, Gordon, there is no secret top clever trick for this. The fact that you've crushed and hardened the snow is what's causing it to stick into the waxless fish scales on the bottom of your skis. What would we do? We have had this in Norway, and we used candle wax, which was great for stopping it balling up, but then you lost grip. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You could choose to get those 30-year-old Telemark skis on eBay. They will sell this year because everybody's buying skis. And then buy yourself a set of the new versions that have a small skin that just clips in underneath the middle part of your foot. And that doesn't ball up as much as the waxless or waxed skis. But I'm afraid that is a worldwide problem, and there is no solution.
Just a little top tip from me, Gordon. I do quite a lot of Nordic skiing, and my other half has a pair of 30-plus-year-old skis, and the bases are pretty roughed up and damaged, and he's often balling up, and I'm not, on a much newer pair. So it could be there's just little micro nicks in the bottom of the bases, and they tend to ball up a lot easier than something that's much newer. So yeah, as Andy says, it might be a good idea to put them on eBay and treat yourself to a new pair. Now, Di. Oh, go on, Di.
Suggest 30-year-old skis should be above the fireplace.
Yeah, maybe that is a good place for the 30-year-old skis. Yeah. We want for you, Di, because you're a bit of a gnarly skier here. Top tips for skiing / turning in deep Scottish powder from CJ. Now, CJ, if you're finding deep Scottish powder, awesome, mate. That's all I can say. And aren't we lucky if we're finding that? So, Di, a top tip for skiing deep Scottish powder?
Can I come skiing with you? Because I never skied deep Scottish powder. I've got no idea to straight line it. Like, I'm not a ski instructor.
Oh, Andy, we're over to you, mate. We're over to you.
So, use your upper body. If you're struggling, look where you want to go. It's not what the ski instructors will teach you, but using upper body rotation will help you turn in heavy powder. And then if you combine that with lots of leg bend and extension at the right time, that will help. Partly the other side of that is, Di is quite right. A bit of a straighter line and a bit more speed will help you push and plow your way through the snow. So sometimes you just got to grab the bit between your teeth and go for it. Obviously, deep Scottish powder will have rocks and things hidden in it. So make sure you know what you're skiing on or over before you start straight lining it and taking too much speed.
Nice one. And Graham, this isn't quite your speciality, but I'm pretty confident you're going to give us a good answer here. What is the minimum kit to get into Scottish backcountry skiing, what would you say was the absolute minimum that you took out with you during the day?
Well, I would definitely take a bit of skis with me, and all that sort of stuff. I think in terms of sort of safety stuff, I presume that's where the question might be coming from. You know, everybody will say that you should be carrying a transceiver, shovel, and probe, which, you know, actually isn't a bad idea. But what's more important is that you know how to use them, and actually you'd plan not to use them. So, you know, you take your brain with you and your imagination, and you know, choose your route based on the conditions, I would say. But yeah, that's the sort of standard safety kit that people would be taking when they go touring in Scotland, I would suggest. And a shovel's quite handy for, you know, digging a bit out to sit down for your picnic or whatever. But yeah,
Great.
That's sort of.
And
I thought you were going to ask about Scottish powder, because if it was Scottish powder in inverted commas, that's an entirely different kind of snow. You know, Scottish powder, which generally is really, really rubbish and wet and heavy. But hopefully your man's, what's his name? Sorry, is it CJ? Yeah, excellent. Scottish powder, I'd love some as well. Same as Di. We're going to follow you around, I think.
Yeah, and just to add to the kit list, you know, even if I'm trying to cut things down to the absolute minimum, you know, definitely got a bivy bag in there, and I've definitely got a synthetic duvet jacket and map and compass, spare pair of gloves, you know, food and hot flasks. So think about, you know, the worst case scenario, if you did injure yourself and you were waiting for help to arrive, would you have the additional layers to keep you warm enough to stop you going down with hypothermia? So we all like to carry minimum amount of kit, particularly when we're skiing, but I certainly always have that basic of a bivy bag, duvet jacket, and food and drink. So hopefully that'll get you started. So I'm just going to go back to a question from Alison, and it's for you, Di. Are there any Schema races for complete beginners?
Oh, so it depends what you mean by a complete beginner. Like, I'm assuming they are a competent backcountry skier, and they're not like first time on skis, I'm assuming. So if you were wanting to get into the Schema side, I would probably suggest the left race, because that's short, cut-off time of 90 minutes, and it's pretty mellow terrain, as opposed to, as soon as we're going to go into the Glen Shee, the Glencoe, and the Nevis range, they tend to be a lot more serious terrain that we're going into. But all that sort of information is on the website, so it's not as if we are putting it into the deep end. So certainly for Glencoe, we do try and get people down the fly paper, which is quite a steep slope, and we do try and get people in the back quarries and Nevis range. So if you have an experience where it's like with the back quarries and Nevis range, you might not want to be doing that in a racing environment. If you're perhaps more a fan of like going the skinning, we do have 2 vertical courses where literally all we time is the ascent. So if you quite enjoy the skinning element, there's a vertical at Glencoe and there's a vertical at Nevis range. So I would certainly, in my little radar, I'd be putting on the left and then the vertical courses, and then take it from there.
Lovely. Cheers. Hopefully you get some newbies next season. And question from Ruth, and this is a really important one. Ruth has just moved to the Scottish borders, where there'll be a great amount of snow at the moment. And what's the best way to get into ski touring, and especially as the sort of traditional clubs aren't operating at the moment? So, you know, for example, there's a really big club that's Edinburgh based. That's a really good question, Ruth, because it's not an easy sport to get into. The kit's expensive, and also it's multiple skills, because it's all about learning to ski, obviously, which I think you need to do in a ski resort first before you take it onto the more challenging conditions of the open hill. But it's also all about the sort of mountaineering and navigation skills as well. So it's not an easy answer. And I'm going to pass you to Andy, because I know there's several places, for example, Glenmore Lodge and local outfits, certainly in Strathspey, who offer novice ski touring courses, Andy?
Yeah, no, Glenmore Lodge certainly does offer ski touring courses in a normal winter. There's also British Backcountry, which is a Facebook group for conditions, and it's also a business that offers courses. And Blair and Gav, who run that, are based in Edinburgh, I think. No, Edinburgh, yes. So they might be a bit closer to you. There's lots of organisations that do offer ski touring courses. You can do it on your own. That might be a little bit controversial. It's also a little bit boring because you haven't got anybody to take your super picture of you skiing, the hero shot, unless you want to ski around with a selfie stick all the time, which makes you look like a wally. So definitely, I would definitely suggest, Ruth, that you don't wait until clubs start operating again. Maybe go out and have a little exploration. Good weather, nice snow conditions, don't go too far. You might bump into some nice people, and then suddenly you've got yourself hero photographers ready at your disposal.
Super.
That's about it. And obviously, when clubs are able to run, the Eagle Ski Club is a national ski club that runs touring courses in Scotland. Not courses, touring trips. Some of them are guided, some of them are led, and some of them are just turn up and have a punt. And they'd be well worth having a look at.
And also be aware that some of the bigger Tizo stores, like, for example, the one in Aviemore, do hire out ski mountaineering kits. So if you haven't got the kit and you want to try before you buy, then that is a really good option for you as well, to hire the kit for a couple of days and get a handle on it. Graham, one for you here, definitely, because it's all about digging a hole and getting in it. Alistair is asking, at what stages of the day would you dig snow pits to check the layers?
Yeah, that's a good question, Alistair. So in the course of my day in trying to work out where the avalanche hazard is in the mountains, I do not dig any snow profiles or snow pits to tell me what the snow is doing, because if I'm looking at the weather and looking around me, there's plenty of information that I can pick up on that points towards what the hazard is and where the hazard is. So I think the question is, why would you want to dig, not when would you want to dig a snow profile? And I think if you ask yourself why you want to dig a profile, you get into all sorts of trouble, because I don't think there's any reasonable reason to dig a snow profile in terms of using the information you get to work out what the hazard is. At the very least, all you're doing is looking at the snow layers where you're digging. If you go 1 meter or 2 meters or 3 meters to the side, the snow will be different. Certainly, I would say maybe 20-ish, 25 years ago, all the education was based on digging a hole in the snow and looking at the different layers and then doing some sort of amazing interpretation as to what that meant everywhere. But since then, I think understanding and education has evolved, and now it plays a very, very small part, if any, in actual hazard evaluation. So yes, I mean, it's interesting, but it shouldn't tell you anything you don't already know.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that, Graham. And I think this is one for you, Andy, and I don't quite understand the question myself, even though I am an avid ski tourer for 30 years. It's from Gavin. When would you use backcountry skis versus touring skis? And Gavin's wondering if he needs to buy a new pair of skis.
Yes, you do. Always need new skis. There's no such thing as the right amount of skis in your life.
Is that a pair behind you for sale, for example, Andy?
Well, I'm keeping them. They're nice. Gavin, I'm assuming, and you know what they say about assumptions, backcountry skis, you're talking about something a bit longer, a bit wider, maybe a bit heavier. And and then touring skis, you're thinking about something light and thin. The good news is you could use backcountry skis to go ski touring, and you could do backcountry skiing on touring skis. If they're big and heavy, they're going to be much harder work going uphill, but they're going to be a lot more fun coming down. If they're light and thin and wiggly, like the Schema skis that they noodle their way uphill on, then they're going to be light and thin for noodling back down. So if you want a big carvy arc turns, powder slash turns, stick with your backcountry skis. If you want to make long distances with lots of ups and downs, do your legs a favour and buy yourself something a little bit lighter and a little bit thinner. But I'm afraid, Gavin, the long and short of it is you need both. Because obviously with all this deep powder we have in Scotland, you're going to need your backcountry skis. And when that deep powder consolidates and becomes a little bit more windblown and harder, then you'll definitely need your touring skis. A quiver, it's at least 3 pairs of skis long. Yeah, something thin, something in the middle, about 100 mil, and something big, like 115, 116 underfoot for the really deep Scottish powder days.
Andy, I think for most people, you're talking of a dream world there, boy. And if Christmas is just past, so there's no hope for me.
So, I mean, a good ski width, 100 millimeters underfoot, it will do you all year round. Well, not all year round, all season in Scotland. Go on, Di.
I'm like you are medium. Is the 100 under your feet?
Yeah, that's a medium.
My big's 95 under my feet.
Right, moving on before these two start having a scrap. Di, bit of a local question this. Zoe's wanting to know, and make it snappy, what are the ski touring conditions like in the Cromdales just now?
This morning they were excellent. So we were northwest aspect, nothing above 700 meters, sweet as.
And that's the key, isn't it? Thinking about the aspect and which way the wind's been coming from and where it's been scouring and where it's been deposited.
And the big thing as well, Heather, is that we noticed these lines we skied today, yesterday. And so we sort of like, we pulled over on the way back from yesterday's adventure and we saw these lines and we're like, that's where we're skiing. So yeah, and then your homework then starts from there.
Lovely, nice one. We've got so many questions coming in. I'm trying to sort of stay on top of it. And there's just one for Andy again. Apparently, Andy, you were doing a very good session the other night and you mentioned fat maps. Now, I'm sure you weren't being rude about someone's physique here. We want to know what's the crack with fat maps apps?
Oh.
What's the uses? What's the value of it?
Yeah, so I think in that session, I suggested the Fat Map was a good planning tool. It is. I mean, they have the base map, but they also give you a 3-dimensional view with slope angles on. So you can look at your proposed route and see any steepness, any sort of steep terrain or shallows. You can spot convexities, all in the planning stage. You can do that on the hill as well, but then your fingers get a bit nippy while you're using your finger to move the screen around. If you're a bit of a techno nerd like me, yeah, Fat Map, get it. You'll love it. You'll find a use for it. If you're less of a techno nerd, then I would look for one of the base mapping navigation apps. That's probably better value for you. Something like View Ranger or OS Maps, they're perfect for that. And just remember that your telephone battery doesn't last very long when you're in the cold. It's also your emergency tool, so you need to protect that battery. And if you get really geeky, then you might start to decide to carry other tools like Garmin InReach and a second phone and all that sort of stuff. But yes, Fat Map as a planning tool, very good. Not expensive, but also look at View Ranger and OS Maps.
I think it's a good point about the functionality of just relying on your phones, isn't it? I mean, mine's an iPhone 5 and I only have to get it out of my pocket and it's dead in the sort of conditions we have at the moment. So on the subject of apps, Graham, I believe there's a pretty important app called BAA. Would you just like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're right, Heather. BAA. So a number of years ago, some partner organizations got together, and the Be Avalanche Aware process, for want of a better word, was created. And it was kind of a bit of an educational tool, but also information. And it's got quite a lot of stuff in it, but you can delve into it at different levels. A bit like if you're doing first aid, you know, ABC in first aid could be taught in a day, or it could be taught, you know, in a month, depending on what level you're into it. So BAA just provides a really good framework for decision making in avalanche terrain, or choosing routes in the mountains. And you can get it from the App Store and the other one, whatever it's called, the googly thing. And it's free. And yeah, it's a lot of good information in it. So there's a process in there. You know, it goes through a lot of planning stuff, what information you should get for planning your routes, what things you should be looking out for when you're traveling around in the mountains, and what information you'd be looking for when you're making sort of key decisions as to, you know, which way you're going to go, up or down or left or right or stuff. So yeah, it's really good. It's full of stuff. You can, I think, see most of it through the Avalanche Service website as well. There's information there, but it's sort of neatly packaged up in the app. And also in the app, there is a link to all the avalanche reports across Scotland. There's some mapping in it as well, which is free, OS maps, which you can superimpose the hazard rows onto. And it's also quite a natty little gizmo for estimating slope angle as well. But you have to use that through your phone, and it's quite good. So yeah, it's all there. It's free.
Pretty essential tool, isn't it, for ski tourists to download that free app
anyway for and to fill.
And just to remind folk, it's called the BAA, Be Avalanche Aware. So have a look at it after the evening's entertainment. Di, this is definitely one for you, because I know you like your esoteric little trips out. Graham is asking, and I'm not sure you're going to answer this, where are your favourite tours to get away from the crowds? What would your advice be to Graham?
Right. So what you do not want to do is go to the place where somebody has posted on social media the day before. To avoid where everybody is posting about, because that is where people will do it. So I genuinely love looking at maps and working out where to go myself. And when I go out ski touring, I very, very, very rarely meet anybody else, except for if I'm in what I would call honeypot areas. So I look at the weather, I look at the avalanche forecasts, and I then thoroughly enjoy planning trips. And that is the only way that you're going to get better at planning the good ski touring days. Because I definitely do not want to be in a pea suit on the East Coast when they're all putting on their sun cream and their sunglasses on the West Coast. And the only way you're going to get better at that is to do your own planning. So look at maps and avoid where people have posted the night before that they were there today on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah. So for example, you know, if on British Backcountry or something, someone's just put an amazing picture, then definitely don't go there, or not for a while. Store it away for reference for the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick one for you from Parisa. She can't wash her skins. They're for a split board and they're not washable, but she's got loads of good Scottish stuff stuck to them, like moss, grass, etc. Any tips rather than just trying to pick it all off?
Is that for me?
Yeah, go for it, Andy.
Yeah, stick them on your split board. Obviously, stick them glue side down, and then if you have one of those little suede brushes that you posh up your party pixie boots with, take one of those and very gently give it a brush. You can, when it's stuck on the board, you could add a little bit of soap and water to it, but not a lot, just enough to get rid of the dirt. And that way you'll get a bit of that clear off. And then just go skin through lots and lots of wet snow. That will give them a proper spa treatment as well.
I think we could all do with a bit of spa treatment, Andy, as well as the skins. Anyway, Derek is asking, and this is probably a good question for me actually, when touring, pacing and timing are tricky, very tricky, Derek, particularly in descent in poor visibility. So how do you keep a check on nav while skinning and skiing? So skinning, it's a lot easier. Some people actually mark 50 centimeters down from the tip of their ski and just put a black line across the ski, so you can pace in meters how far you're going if you're on the flat or skinning up, and you get a good idea of distance. But obviously that's possible in descent. And I would say my top tip would be, if I'm going out onto the hill and I'm unsure whether I'm going to keep the visibility, then I definitely want a GPS with me when I'm on ski, because judging how far you've gone in descent is really challenging, and you can get yourself into difficulties very, very quickly. So obviously you can time in ascent as well, you know, like we use Naismith's rule for hill walking at 5k an hour. Then you could use something similar, depending on, you know, you could work out how far you covered in you know, skinning uphill, how long it took you to get from A to B, and use that as an average. So skinning up is a lot more easy to keep a track on how far you've gone, but skiing down, very challenging in poor vis. And I would say the nice thing to have on your phone, and if we're getting kind of in modern technology again, is another app called OS Locate. That's Ordnance Survey Locate, and it operates on your phone GPS, and it will give you a 6-figure grid reference, and it's really useful. Get out of jail free card. If you're not sure of your location, you can just get the 6-figure grid reference, put it on your map, and then make the best decision you can to sort out the situation you're in. But yeah, poor vis in descent on ski is challenging, however experienced you are. And one thing that I do is, if I'm trying to follow a bearing on ski in descent, and I just have a compass here, I actually took it. I don't know if folk can see this, but I've got the blue one obviously, and the ski pole strap, and the compass is attached to my body but tucked under the ski pole strap. It's not easy, but that's how I use the compass when I'm on ski. So I'm going to move on now. Hopefully we have helped you with that. And I'm just looking at the next question. Another one from CJ. Ooh, what is the most effective way to change direction on ski without losing elevation? Anyone want to come in on that? I'm not really sure I understand that question, CJ, so you might want to come back to us on that. And what I do understand though, and Di is very good at this one, how can I improve my uphill kick turns? That's CJ as well. What's your top tip on kick turns, Di?
Practice, and lots of practice. And I think certainly if you have got like I'm sure Andy's got really long skis, like it will be quite hard for Andy to turn his skis around with somebody in a short pair of skis. So practice, and actually if you're not very flexible in the hips, it's going to be even harder. But I suppose my one top tip would be is when I place that downhill ski to sort of like prep the swing round, don't make that horizontal. So try and get that ski uphill, and therefore you're not having to do a 180 turn that nobody else can do. So I would sort of like say that would be my one tip, is to get that downhill ski facing up a little bit. And I think where a lot of people really struggle with their kick turn is when they then bring that downhill ski around to the uphill side. And it's basically a case of bend your knee, drop your leg back and guide the ski, because you see quite a lot of people trying to jump their ski around. And if they just sort of like use their leg a little bit differently, they'll master that. Have a little look on Google, YouTube, I'm sure you'll find something. Or do I go on?
And also choose your location carefully, you know, where you actually turn, because you can get yourself into difficulties by trying to turn on something that's very hard and icy when 10 meters further on there's a bit of wind and it's easier, softer terrain.
Yeah, and I think as well, actually, if you see people, because there's so many people at ski touring just now, watch what people that actually look quite good at kick turning are doing. And if you can watch and imitate, that's a sort of free way of getting some lessons. So ski with people who are better than you and learn from other people that you see out in the hills with.
Nice. And Graham, we're back to Avalanche again. Patrick wants to know, and I don't want any facetiousness going on here, is there an angle of slope that will not avalanche?
Well, that's a good question. I think it'd be easier to answer the opposite question, which is which are the most popular angles of slope to avalanche, because that's an easy one. And the most popular angle would be somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees. And I would suggest on a pair of skis, you're going to know if you're on a slope between 30 and 45 degrees, because most people will be thinking, by gosh, this is quite steep. At lower angle slopes, so we're not that interested more than 45 degrees, I presume. I hope not. Less than 30-ish, lots of good skiing. There's no reason why a 20-degree slope can't avalanche, but it's certainly it's not as popular if you're an avalanche, that is. And also you need to bear in mind that you might be on a 20-degree slope, but there might be a 40 or 45-degree slope above you. So if the slopes release above, they can certainly travel on lower angle slopes. And, a big enough avalanche will travel on flat ground. So, yeah, I would think, if you go above 30 degrees, you want to have a lot more awareness as to what's going on. I'm not going to say between 20 and 30 is going to be safe, but it's going to be, there's going to be less avalanche activity there, but also have an awareness of what the slopes are like and the angles above you would be.
Yeah, and I think, whilst we're on sort of, steepness of slope, I would always be very switched on to what was happening above me with regard to other people. So, I could be on, say, a 20-degree slope and be very safe from an avalanche point of view and not going to be triggering something. But if someone cuts in above me on steep ground, then I definitely want to keep half an eye on that and maybe make sure I get out of the way just in case they trigger something that comes down and affects me. So nice one, Graham. Rob, tips on taking your doggy ski touring. I think this is probably one for me, actually, having had a doggy with me for many ski tours over the years. Sadly, Millie's no longer with us. And so this dog is well used to mountain conditions. Rob, you need to be one step ahead thinking about the dog's safety. I've been out with dogs that try and eat the skis, which obviously is not very helpful and dangerous for the dog with the metal edges. So teaching the dog very early on in the process to stay well away from the skis and ensuring that people that you are out with are sort of, I used to talk about just being doggy aware, because you can't, the skier can read what's happening, ahead with the dog, but the dog isn't necessarily what's happening with the skiers. So going to places that aren't busy, keep them out of ski areas, keep them off piste, just as you do with your dog on the hill, preempt the dangers, be one step ahead of the dog. And going downhill, I always used to like to make sure that Millie was behind me, and then I wasn't trying to focus on what was happening with the dog. Just knew she was behind me and out of any danger, because dogs do get injured by skiers and snowboards, and I'm speaking from experience there. And in fact, there was one in Stras Vegas recently who was seriously injured by a ski edge. So great to go ski touring with the dog. But a final thing on it, just some conditions are great to take the dog out, when it's quite firm snow and the dog is stayed on the surface of the snowpack. But if it's soft snow, you might be having a yeehaw time, but actually the dog might be really super struggling. So just be mindful of the length of the day and how difficult it is for the dog as well. Right, moving on. Oh, this is a bit of a random one. Open to all. Stuart's asking, any knowledge of skiing in the Trossachs? Well, that's an easy answer, isn't it? Sorry, Stuart, none of us have ever skied in the Trossachs. Adam, interested in trying to get up some more distant Munros. Any particular areas or mountain ranges that are good for beginners? Di, I think I'll pass that on to you.
Oh, once again, I'm going to revert back to my look at a map. So if I'm looking for nice, friendly ski touring hills, I particularly am looking for grassy as opposed to rocky and nice mellow terrain. So actually read a hill walking book, like whether it be Walk Highlands or Munro's book. So read a hill walking book, and if it speaks about probably things like uninspiring hill walk, straight away I flick on my ski touring eyes, because what's probably a very uninspiring tame hill walk will probably be a very peachy ski tour. So look at a map, and actually just now, just look at pictures of that hill on the internet. And if it looks a nice heathery or a short grassy hill, that's your puppies. And don't necessarily think big, because quite often what you find is if you're looking at Munro height hills over the 3,000 feet, quite often the top ones, it'll be really wind scoured, you have that hard sastrugi that we've got just now. And actually, sometimes the best hills are the lower ones, whether it be your Corbetts, a little bit lower, below the clouds, so you can choose your vision and your descents a lot better as well. So look at maps, look at books, do your homework before you commit.
Another really good resource as well is the Ski Tour in Scotland book by Bennett. In fact, I'll get one and show people. I'm just looking over at my other half to go and get it from downstairs. And there's a new edition coming out oh, here we are, we've got one. Thank you, Andy. Just hold it right up to the screen so people can see it. So if you're looking for some esoteric, out of the way places to go that are rarely skied, then that is an ancient book. It goes back to, is it 1986, Andy, it was published? But there is a new edition coming out in the next 12 months. I've been involved with it, and it'll be all up to date, flashy and modernized. So you can still get that book out there on Amazon, and it does give you some good information. So moving on, it's piling in the questions. I don't know if we're going to get them all covered. Julian says, I've just bought deer for all the family as a treat. What can I do to maintain the skis myself, as it will get expensive to get them serviced? That's got to be one for you, Andy.
Okay. No, you can service ski touring skis at home. When you're ski touring, you're not after race performance, so you don't need razor sharp edges, you don't need perfect bases, and you don't need the most expensive waxing. What you'll need, Julian, is an edge guide, a file that will do your edges. Don't go too steep, so 90 or 89 degrees is the angle. If you go 88, 87, you'll have really sharp skis, but every little rock or chucky you hit will just take chunks out your edges. So just 89 to 90 is enough. You can buy wax pretty easy. Make sure it's a hydrocarbon wax, because if it's a fluorocarbon wax, you'll ski downhill very fast, but your skins won't stick to your skis. They'll come straight off. So you need hydrocarbon wax. You don't need to buy a super expensive iron. Find yourself a little travel iron or an old iron from a shop. That will do. Don't have it too hot, otherwise you'll melt the glue in the skis and they'll fall apart. So that's your edges and that's your wax. You'll need a scraper and a brush, and that's about it. You treat yourself to a set of vices. That will make the job a lot easier. And then little holes and things like that, as long as they're not too close to the edges and they don't go too deep, I wouldn't worry about them. Fill them with some wax and forget about it. And then every so often, if you do get a big bit of damage, you can get that repaired, and that will save you servicing them as regularly as you would, say, a piste ski or a race ski.
Yeah, I think a top tip
to do it themselves.
Top tip for Scottish skiing don't be too precious about your skis, because if you do, you don't enjoy it, and inevitably you're going to do some damage to them in Scottish conditions. So
your skis are weapons, not trophies.
Is that the quote of the night, Andy?
Could be. I'm going for it.
Jessie, I don't know if you're on Mila Buckle today, but this is what we experienced. She set off what was a good layering system for touring. Jessie started off wrapped up too warm because it was a really cold start to the day, and ended up being basically too warm and really sweaty. So I'm going to compete with Andy for the quotes here. Start cold and bold. When I set off skinning on a morning, I am wearing just a thermal under my Gore-Tex jacket. Start off really cold, and within 10-15 minutes you're at your sort of running temperature, and then when you get to the top of your skin, you've got multiple layers that you put on, because there's nothing worse than getting into a sweaty mess on the way up and not bothering to stop and take layers off, and then you're really chilly for the rest of the day, particularly when you get exposed to the wind higher up. So start off cold and bold, minimum layers under your windproof jacket, and then add layers as you need them higher up. Anyone got anything to add to the layering thing there? Good, good, good. So hopefully, Jessie, that helps. Cold and bold, it was much better than Andy's quote anyway. Oh, here we go. Oh, Graham from Shona. Is there a way to tell 30-degree slopes on an OS map? Is there a reference card or similar?
So there is a way to tell 30-degree slopes from an OS map, and but I don't know what it is. Andy knows probably, and and Heather knows as well. You can also get little natty cards, sort of credit card type things. I think Mountain Training used to dish them out, and they've got little scales on them for various maps, like the RV maps, and Andy's got one. Look, he's going to bring it up. No, he's not.
Going for the brownie points on visuals, isn't he?
Lost it. So yeah, so just get a wee card, I would say, unless Andy knows the magic number for how many millimeters apart the contours are.
Well, I can tell you, on a 1 to 50,000 map, every 50 meters you've got your index contours, the dark brown contours, and if the gap between those index contours, the dark brown contours, is 2 mils or less, you're on a 30-degree angle slope. So you can clearly see from your OS map before you set out if your route takes you onto that key 30 degrees. So it's 2 mils between the index contours on a 1 to 50, and on a 1 to 25, it's actually 4 mils. There are these little cards available whilst we're on cars. I'm just trying to usurp Andy here. It's a B Avalanche Aware card, and they are available from the Scottish Avalanche Commission Service, aren't they, Graham? Not sure how people get hold of those, but there are cards, and Mountain Training do them, which have that slope angle on them as well, but they're not easy to get hold of. So 2 mils between the index contours and a 1 to 50,000 map is a 30. And another lovely rule of thumb is if there's missing contours between the index contours, there should always be 4 skinny lines between the 2 dark lines. If there's any missing, then you're into 30-degree angle of slope as well. Right, we've got just 5 minutes left, guys, and we've got quite a few questions here. There's one here from David, and I think just pitching, probably Andy, if you kick off with this. What's the attraction of pin bindings? They are light, but I find them fiddly and too many moving parts.
Like you said, David, they're light, and saving a few grams on your feet is always worthwhile, because it makes the ski, it keeps your legs fresh for when you want to ski back downhill. The other thing about pin bindings, which the manufacturers are addressing, is that the pin bindings sit really close to the toe of the boot. So when you do a kick turn, the ski hangs in a very nice angle to help you with the kick turn. And the old frame bindings, the hinge used to be in front of the toe of the boot, and then it didn't hang quite so nice, and you had to do a little extra sort of Bruce Lee karate kick to get the ski to come round. But a lot of the manufacturers of the frame bindings have addressed that and moved the hinge back. So, you know, I would say if you're doing a lot of touring with a lot of up and down, buy yourself some pin bindings, and it takes practice. You'll get the knack, and then you'll get to the end of the season and you'll forget the knack, and then you'll start the new season and you won't be able to get your skis on. If you're doing more downhill than you are uphill, I would go with the standard sort of frame bindings like the Diamar Fritches or the Marker Tours or those sort of things, because they're just as good for going uphill. They're a little bit heavier, but they are, as you rightly pointed out, David, a lot easier to get in and out of.
Cool, excellent. And I think we've just got time for 3 more very quick questions. Di from David. Would you kick turn with your back to the hill or your back down the slope? Are you facing the hill or facing outwards for your kick turns?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but when I kick turn, I turn it uphill as in into the slope.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not facing down the way. Oh, definitely uphill. Oh,
yeah.
Every single time.
So you're definitely facing up the hill to do your kick turns.
Absolutely, always.
Okay, lovely. Hope that answers your question simply, David. And oh, blimey. Just another quick one for you, Di, from me. I don't know how to pronounce this. Apologies, George. Recommendations for brands of clothing for Schema.
Oh, one brand I'd look at is Dynafit. They do everything from the Lycra, but they also do what I would call is like their speed Schema range, which is probably a bit more geared towards their recreational enthusiast. So a bit more aerobic, but not if you don't want to have everything on display. So they've got a nice balance of Lycra and nice speed Schema kit that you and I would wear, Heather.
Di, you definitely don't want everything on display. Final one for you, Graham. This is coming in from Anonymous. They're wondering why on your avalanche forecasts you never forecast a black very high hazard.
Well, there's the thing. So I think throughout the world, very few people forecast very high. And certainly in Scotland, maybe I think in 30 years we might have done it once or twice quite a long time ago. So the avalanche hazard, as well as a function of stability, is also a function of avalanche size. And I think the definition of very high is, you know, large avalanches on all aspects. So again, that's a set of conditions that we don't really get in Scotland. And I think even if you looked in the Alps, you would probably only find very high being used, you know, if at all, maybe once or twice every other year. And there's actually some of the countries have kind of phased it out from the avalanche hazard scale, although it's still mentioned, it's not a separate line. It'll be lumped in with high. So the conditions have got to be fairly exceptional, or if you're an avalanche forecaster, quite exciting to go for very high. And yeah, it's just such a rare event that doesn't really happen too much.
Lovely, thank you. And Ross, I'm aware we haven't got around to your question and it's pretty complex, so I am going to recommend, Ross is looking at advice on buying kits. So Ross, if you email me, heather@mountaineering.scot, and my colleague behind the scenes will put that on the Facebook page, heather@mountaineering.scot. Give me an email and we'll sort out a time for a chat over the phone, because it's a very complex question and I can give you some pointers in the right direction. So I think we're going to wrap that up, folks. It's 8 o'clock and I'd like to say a huge big thank you to our team of professionals here. So that's Graham from the Scottish Avalanche Information Service, Guy from Schema Scotland and a very avid ski tourer, and Andy Townsend here from Glenmore Lodge, head of snow sports. And thank you all out there for joining us this evening. And as I said right at the start, I'm really hoping you're able to get out and enjoy some of your local hills in this amazing winter conditions that we're enjoying. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you on the hill sometime. Bye.